everyone, we're here to read more of Ratscaliber by Josh Lieb. I want to let you know that the Gilbert Library is open. You can come in and look for books and look around. So let's get going, starting with chapter 6. "Where is he?" Mom said. "I don't understand it," said Uncle Patrick. The apartment was a mess. Every box was emptied, every door was open, every blanket was torn off every bed. Every place an 11-year-old boy could possibly hide had been searched. Joey was gone. Mom had woken up first and tiptoed past Uncle Patrick, who was still snoring on the couch, to wake up Joey. But Joey wasn't in his bed, or under his bed, or in his closet. He couldn't have gotten through the bars on the window, and the chain lock was still bolted on the front door, so he couldn't have gotten out that way either. But somehow, Joey was gone. That's when Mom started to freak out. She shook Uncle Patrick awake and made him help her look. They didn't find anything except for the coffee maker, which had been stuffed at the bottom of a box of books in Joey's bedroom. I shouldn't have brought him to the stupid city," said Mom. She kicked the coffee maker across the floor and it banged against the wall. "Don't blame yourself," said Uncle Patrick. "You took this job for Joey. Joey is going to do great here." "Then where is he?" said Mom. She sounded like she was going to cry, but Mom never cried. Uncle Patrick hugged her and patted her back. Mom started breathing normally again. She stood up very straight and took a deep breath. She looked down at Joey's bedside table. "The rat is dead," she said. And then, like it was part of the same sentence, "I'm going to call the police." She went into the living room to get her phone. Uncle Patrick looked at the hamster cage. The rat definitely wasn't moving. Uncle Patrick tapped the bars to see if he could wake it up. Chapter 7. Joey liked running on rat feet. They were tougher than human feet, so the ground didn't hurt. But he could still feel all the little pebbles and puddles he was running through, which felt really cool. He had been running ever since the sun came up. The invisible trail he was following had led him down 3 alleys, over 2 wooden fences, and under 1 garbage dumpster. He hoped he would reach King Uther soon. He was very hungry, and Mom was probably pretty worried. He jumped off a roof and slid down a long rain gutter, like it was a playground slide, and when he came out, he was there. Something in his brain went ding, like the GPS on Mom's car when it reached a destination. But he would have probably figured it out anyway, because of all the rats. They were everywhere. There were rats pushing wheelbarrows, there were rats rolling around wrestling, there were rats standing behind the counters of little wooden stores, like shacks made out of sticks, selling breadcrumbs and dried bugs and other things. There were soldier rats marching around with feathers tucked behind their ears. There were mother rats licking their pink little rat babies. There were rats laughing and yelling and crying. It was a whole village of rats. None of them paid any attention to Joey. The rat village was on a square piece of land where 4 big buildings came together but didn't quite meet. There were a few bits of brown grass on the ground, but mostly it was dirt. The rats were going in and out of holes that went under the walls. Joey figured those must be the rats' houses. There was one great big hole in the middle of a stone wall at the far side of the village, with rocks piled in front of it like steps, and fat rat soldiers standing guard. He could feel the little fishing line in his nose tugging him to that door. That must be King Uther's palace. Something else tingled in his nose, something strangely familiar and mildly unpleasant. Joey looked around and jumped back when he saw a cat walking past him. But the smell wasn't nearly as bad as the big orange cat. This cat was smaller and cleaner and black and white. But the strangest part was the little white rat riding on top of it, like a knight or a cowboy riding a horse. None of the other rats seemed to be scared of the cat. A few of them yelled greetings to the white rat. "Halloo, Parsifer, back from questing?" And the little rat, who wore a peanut shell on his head like a helmet, said, for a bit, and giggled like he'd said something funny. Joey's nose twitched again. He smelled food, and he remembered how hungry he was. In front of each rat hole, the rats had laid out a little cloth like a tiny picnic blanket. Now they were bringing food out of the holes and piling it in the middle of the blankets. It wasn't stuff he would have called food yesterday. A dirty raisin, a wilted piece of lettuce, a beef of jerky with little white worms crawling on it. But it sure looked good now. Maybe if the rats were having a picnic, they would share. He looked around for something he could eat right away, without asking. In front of the king's palace, someone had left a big biscuit just laying out there. There was a white plastic spork with a broken handle sticking out of the top of the biscuit. Joey thought that was weird. Who eats a biscuit with a spork? But it didn't look like anyone was trying to eat it now. Maybe he could have a nibble. His nose answered him, no. With one sniff all the way across the square, he could tell the biscuit was too stale to eat, hard as a rock, too hard for even his razor-sharp teeth to gnaw at. This wonderful nose was more talented than he'd thought. A giant fluffy brown rat with long silky hair that trailed in the dirt was walking past the biscuit. This rat was tremendous, twice as tall as any of the others and 3 times as round. It was fat. Its hair was so long you couldn't see its feet, so it looked like it was floating above the ground like a furry balloon. Joey didn't understand what he was looking at until he realized that it wasn't a rat at all. It was a guinea pig. The guards in front of the palace started laughing when they saw the guinea pig. Here to have another try, Brutilda asked, but Brutilda, if that was her name, just ignored them and shook her woolly head as she passed. Joey noticed there was a ragged pink bow pinned to one of her ears. How dare you show your face here, varlet? Someone said, surprisingly close to Joey. Joey looked behind him and saw a black rat on top of a gray cat. The cat had a lean and mean face with scars all over it, like he did a lot of fighting. Luckily, he wasn't talking to Joey. He was yelling across the square at the white rat Joey had seen before, who was still riding the white and black cat. Everyone in the village hushed and watched. The white rat laughed with a brave squeak, ha ha ha, and pushed the peanut shell to the back of his head. Yes, I dare show my face, Drattleby. He gave a very big smile. His teeth flashed in the sun like little knives. And why shouldn't I show my face? 'Tis a far more pleasant face than yours. Rogue, hissed the black rat. He pulled a popsicle stick off the back of his cat, held it straight out in front of him, and dug his rat heels into the side of his cat. Yah, he yelled, yah! And his cat started galloping straight at the white rat. But the white rat wasn't scared. If anything, his big smile got bigger. He pushed his peanut shell down over his face, pulled his own popsicle stick out, and started galloping right at his enemy. And as he charged, Joey could hear him laughing behind his mask. Ha 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 ha! And then they struck. Chapter 8. Twang! It was over in a flash. 1 second, the 2 rats were charging at each other as fast as they could. The next, the black rat was lying on his back in the dust. The white rat was still on top of his cat, and he was pointing his popsicle stick down so it brushed at the fallen rat's neck. I yield! I yield! Yelled the black rat. At first, Joey thought the black rat was bleeding, but then he saw that the popsicle stick was just stained red at the tip with old popsicle juice. The white rat didn't move. Yielding won't be enough this time, Drattleby. I demand more. The black rat hissed. Curse you, Parsifer! What would you have of me? Parsifer, the white rat, smiled again. You must tell me how pretty I am. Drattleby made a lot of mean noises, but the white rat insisted, and after a few minutes of resistance, the black rat finally said, You, Sir Parsifer, are the prettiest rat in the entire low realm. Besides King Uther, of course, said Parsifer. But really, Drattleby, you're too kind. Then Parsifer let Drattleby get back on his feet, and everyone in the village stopped watching and went back to what they were doing before. Joey thought that maybe he should ask this Parsifer to take him to see the king. He was a knight and everything, after all. But the white rat was already riding over to the far side of the village. Besides, Joey was hungry right now. Maybe he should have a little snack before he delivered his message to the king and got changed back into himself. Joey edged over toward the nearest picnic blanket. Half a cucumber, a lemon peel, and some jelly beans were piled in the middle. Nobody was paying any attention to Joey, but he felt too scared to just take a jelly bean like he wanted to. Would he get arrested? Would the rats attack him for stealing? Then he got lucky. The light in the village started to darken a little, and all the rats started scurrying into their holes. None of them said anything. They just looked at the sky and started going inside. As it got darker, and it got dark fast, more of the rats disappeared. Even the knights led their cats into a little alley where 2 of the walls came together. Joey guessed this was their stable. Were the rats scared of a little rain? Joey looked up and saw a dark cloud hanging in the sky, covering up the sun. A cold wind was starting to blow straight down on him in weird, regular beats. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Almost all the rats were inside now, but Joey was way too hungry to be worried about a stupid thunderstorm, even if it had popped up awfully fast. Joey got right next to his intended target, a green jelly bean. Someone had bitten into it and spit it out, and there was some flecks of what was probably mayonnaise stuck to it. But it looked impossibly delicious to Joey. As soon as the last rats were inside, a few of the palace guards lingered at the doorway. Looking up, he would grab his jelly bean, run to a corner, and feast. It suddenly got very dark. The guards squeaked and jumped inside. The wind was really blowing down on Joey hard. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. But all he could think about was that bright green jelly bean. He was reaching down for it. It was finally his. A skinny arm grabbed him by the leg and yanked him into the nearest hole, so that his claws only scratched at the surface of the candy. Somebody hissed, "Young fool!" Before Joey could even complain, he was inside the hole looking out, and seeing what had made the sky so dark, what had made the wind blow down. It wasn't a cloud, it was a huge flock of oily black birds. Crows. They covered every inch of the square. Somebody tugged on Joey's back leg. "You trying to get yourself killed?" But Joey didn't answer or look back. His eyes were fixed on the crows, especially one that had landed where he'd been standing, and who was now pecking at the hole Joey had disappeared into, as if the bird was still hoping to get an extra snack. The crow had blank black eyes like a doll, but it also had a long, sharp beak like a shark's tooth. But the worst things were its claws. They were spindly and thin and mean. They raked up the ground like they were tearing open a little animal. Joey gasped. Black claws. Chapter 9. As quickly as the invasion had begun, it was over. The crows each picked up a blanket by the corners, then folded the blankets over so that the food was wrapped up tightly. Then they flew back up into the air, clutching their bundles in their black claws. It was suddenly bright and sunny in the village again, but none of the rats was in any hurry to go back outside. Somebody slapped Joey on the ear. "Little dunce, what were you thinking?" Joey finally turned to see who had saved him. It was a pale gray mother rat with a whole cave full of pink baby rats peeking out from behind her, and a few stuck to her chest, drinking. She was very skinny, but very strong. Joey could see the webbing of her lean rat muscles rippling right beneath her fur. She wore an orange starburst wrapper around her head like a handkerchief, and she was furious. I was hungry," Joey stammered. "So you thought you'd take a snack from the tribute?" she squeaked. "Young dung for brains here." She stuffed an acorn into Joey's paws and pushed him out of the hole. "Never darken my den again." The village was starting to fill up again. Joey stood outside the hole, munching on the acorn, which tasted better than he thought it would. He could still hear the rat mother muttering to herself inside. "Nearly got myself killed for that half-wit. Never again. Never." Tributes? Black claws? Rat knights mounted on cats? It was all too much, too fast. Joey couldn't understand any of it. He figured the best thing to do was to deliver his message to the king and get changed back as quickly as possible. But when he climbed the steps to the palace, the guards wouldn't let him pass. "And where do you think you're going?" said the biggest one. "I have a message for King Uther," said Joey. The guards laughed. They stood on their hind legs and peered down at him with their big bellies sticking out. Except for the fur and the teeth, they reminded Joey a lot of some of the bullies at his old school. "Nobody sees the king without an appointment," said the lead guard. "But this message is from—" "Nobody," hissed the guard, and he patted a toothpick he wore strapped to his side with a rubber band. "That's his sword," Joey realized. The guard seemed mean enough to actually use it. Joey hopped off the steps fast, but he had no idea what he should do next. Life in the village had gone back to normal. Anybody who just showed up now wouldn't have any idea that the crows had even been there. But Joey knew, and it made him take in his surroundings with new eyes. Now he noticed that almost all the rats wore a weapon of some kind. There were swords made from toothpicks, and swords made from sharpened matches, and swords made from straightened-out paper clips. There were even some of those plastic swords that his mom put cocktail weenies on for Super Bowl parties. They looked more like real swords than some of the others, but Joey suspected that they probably weren't as strong. Joey looked up at the sky and shivered. It made sense that everyone here had a weapon. He suddenly felt very helpless and naked. He was very aware of how soft his rat body was. He looked around for something he could use to protect himself, a stick, a splinter, anything, but everything seemed to be taken. And then he saw it, right in front of his eyes the whole time, the broken spork sticking out of the stale biscuit. Sure, it didn't look as useful as some of the other swords. The ones made out of paper clips looked especially dangerous, but it was something he could use if he was ever attacked again, and maybe the guards wouldn't be such bullies if Joey had a sword of his own. Joey looked around to make sure the spork didn't belong to anyone. All the rats just walked past it like it wasn't even there. Nobody paid any attention to Joey as he walked to the biscuit and scrambled up on top of it. It was definitely stale. The biscuit felt as cold and hard as the marble floor of a bank lobby. He could hear the guards behind him laughing about some mean joke, but he ignored them. He grabbed the broken handle of the spork and was surprised at how warm it felt, like it was heated from the inside. He took his hands off, wiped them on his fur, and grabbed it again. Nope, still warm. Weird. Then he gave a good hard tug. The spork stuck for a second, then came out of the biscuit with a kind of sigh, leaving 4 little holes where it had been. Joey weighed the spork in his hands, then tossed it from side to side. It was heavier than he'd expected, but it felt good, useful. Joey felt like he could do some damage with it if he had to. Okay, so he had a weapon. Now all he needed was a rubber band or piece of string to tie it to his waist. He looked around to find one. He hadn't noticed how quiet the village had gotten. The guards had stopped laughing. The wheelbarrows had stopped turning. Everyone had stopped talking. They were all staring up at Joey now, where he stood on top of the biscuit, holding his spork. Some of them were scared. Some of them were smiling. But all of them looked amazed. And no one said anything until an old lady rat limped forward and pointed at him with a twisted paw. "The spork in the scone!" she shrieked in a high, quavering voice. "He's drawn the spork from the scone!" And then all the rats were yelling, "The spork in the scone! The spork in the scone! Look! The lad has it! The spork in the scone!" The crowd surged forward, and suddenly 100 little rat paws were grabbing at Joey, and 100 little rat throats were screaming, "Ratscaliber! Ratscaliber!" Chapter 10. Everything happened very quickly after that. The crowd picked Joey up and carried him in their paws to the palace. "Hey, wait!" yelled Joey. "I'll put it back! I'll put it back!" No one listened. They carried him up the steps and through the palace doors past the guards, who looked kind of scared, and down long, curving tunnels that were lit with flickering lamps. The walls were all covered with paintings of brave rats killing monsters. At the end of the longest tunnel, Joey was dumped on the ground in a great big room filled with torches. Ancient tapestries hung from the walls, showing more brave rats defeating more horrible monsters, and giant cats and hordes of terrible-looking wild rats, but the tapestries were faded and old, and there were big moth holes eaten through some of the heroes' faces. A very old rat sat in a very large chair at the front of the room. He looked like he was sleeping with his eyes open, and then he woke up and seemed very surprised to be invaded this way. This was like a nightmare. Trapped beneath the ground, with a crowd of rats at his back and some sort of half-dead rat zombie in front of him. Joey quivered in the dirt and honestly wondered, if he should just curl up into a ball and let them destroy him. But then he thought of Mom. He couldn't bear the thought of never seeing her again, or of leaving her wondering forever what had happened to him, without even saying goodbye, so he forced himself to stand. That's when he noticed that the old rat in the big chair wore some twisted tinfoil on his head, and that over his shoulders he wore a purple velvet cape with the words Crown Royal stitched in gold cursive across the bottom. And the invisible fishing line from Joey's nose just seemed to end at the old rat's feet. Joey suddenly knew where he was. This was the throne room, he thought. That's King Uther. Just as suddenly as the crowd had come in, they were gone. Joey was alone with the king, except he wasn't. Joey saw that there were some other rats gathered around the throne that he hadn't noticed before. There was a tall, strong-looking rat with brown, gray-flecked fur who stood protectively on the right side of the king. There was a white rat about Joey's size, with bright pink nose and even brighter pink eyes. "She's pretty," thought Joey, and then he added, very quickly, for a rat. Brutilda, the guinea pig, was sitting in the corner, lumpishly staring at Joey with hate. She had pulled her ear to her mouth and was chewing sloppily on her pink bow. The tall rat stepped forward and held out a paw. "May I?" he asked. It took Joey a second to realize that he wanted to hold the spork. Joey handed it to him. The rat held it carefully and said, "Remarkable," almost to himself. "Who are you?" asked the pretty white rat. "Joey." She sat silent for a second. "That's a strange name for a hero." "I'm not a hero," said Joey. "I'm just a boy who... Okay, it's a long story. Who are you?" She seemed very surprised by that. "Why, I am Ysleen, princess of the Low Realm, heir to the throne of Uther and apprentice to Gondorf the Grey." "Gondorf?" said Joey. "I know him. He..." "Don't try to tell us about Gondorf, stranger," huffed the guinea pig with open hostility. "I've never heard him mention you." "Brutilda, please," protested the tall rat smoothly. "The stripling is our guest." He turned to Joey. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Sir Aramis, the king's vizier." He handed back the spork. Joey wasn't sure what a vizier was, but it seemed to be important. "And over there, always at the ready, is stout Brutilda, King Uther's loyal but occasionally short-tempered bodyguard." Brutilda snuffed happily and glared at Joey. Brutilda sniffed unhappily and glared at Joey. Joey noticed that the king wasn't saying anything. In fact, it looked like he'd gone to sleep again, though his eyes were still wide open. "I really do know Gondorf," said Joey. "I have a message from him." The room grew still. It was like everyone was holding their breath at once. The princess said, "Well, what's the message? Out with it." Joey swallowed. "The message is that he failed." The vizier loomed closer. "He has failed? He has failed? Surely there's more to the message than that." "No," said Joey, shrinking back. "He said King Uther would understand." "He said the king would understand?" squeaked Princess Ysleen. "But we need to know more. When is Gondorf getting here? When will he explain himself personally?" Joey swallowed again. It was like he had a tennis ball in his throat. He had a feeling this news was not going to go over well. Joey said, "He won't be coming here. I think..." He swallowed again. "I think Gondorf is dead." The silence in the room was complete. Everyone had not only stopped breathing, it was like their hearts had stopped beating too, like their brains had stopped thinking. It was like a room full of statues was staring at Joey. Nothing, no sound, no breath. And then the spell was broken by a strange, ghostly voice chanting, "All is lost! All is lost! All is lost! All is lost!" Over and over, louder and louder. It was the worst voice in the world, and Joey saw that it was coming from the waxy, slack-jawed mouth of the king. And that's where we're stopping for today. I hope to see you next time with the next chapters. Bye!